Welcome to Fear and Fiction, where the stories are strange and the fear is real. What's going on, Fear and Fiction family? We're back. Hope everybody's doing well. Today, we're going to get into those stories y'all really love, those hood paranormal stories. Hope you enjoy them. Please get in those comments and tell me which one is your favorite. Now let's get into it. We slept with our shoes by the bed. Every person in my family, every night. If the building started burning, you needed to be able to move fast. That was not a precaution. That was how you lived in Hunts Point in the South Bronx in 1975. I want you to understand what the neighborhood was before I tell you what happened in it. The South Bronx in the 1970s burned, not metaphorically. 80% of buildings in the area were destroyed by fire. Landlords hired people to light their own buildings for the insurance money. The city cut fire companies at the height of it. Redlining had already stripped the community of loans and resources. 250,000 people were displaced. The fires were not an accident, and they were not the community's fault. And the people who lived through it understood from the beginning that they were being let burn and came back and rebuilt anyway. People grew up always smelling wood and metal burning, always hearing fire trucks at all hours. Sometimes a note was delivered telling you a building on your block would burn that night. Sometimes there was no note. We slept with our shoes on. I was 8 years old in 1975. We lived in a building on Manada Street in Hunts Point, my family and my grandmother, 4th floor. We had a dog named Prince, who my grandmother had brought from Georgia years earlier, and who was large and gentle, and who my grandmother said understood more than dogs were given credit for. The building 2 doors down from us caught fire on a Wednesday night in late October. I was asleep, but the smell woke me. That specific smell of a building catching, different from the usual background smell of the neighborhood, more immediate. I could hear the sirens already. My grandmother had me by the arm before I was fully awake. But Prince didn't come to the door. He was in the kitchen, and he was making a sound I had never heard from him in the 7 years he had been in our family. It was not barking. It was not a whine. It was something lower and more deliberate than either of those. A sound that came from somewhere in him that didn't usually make sound. And when I heard it, the hair on my arm stood up in a way I didn't have a word for at 8 years old. My grandmother stopped. She stood in the hallway with her hand on my arm, and she listened to Prince make that sound. She said, "God bless whoever's still in there." We got out. We stood on Manita Street and watched the building 2 doors down burn. The fire department came. They did what they could. I remember specific things about that night. The color the fire made on the face of the building across the street, the sound of windows breaking, the cold of late October on my feet through thin socks, and the shoes I had just gotten on. In the morning, we learned that the elderly woman from the 3rd floor had not gotten out. She had lived in that building for 22 years. Her name was Mrs. Carver. She had been to our apartment for Christmas dinner twice. She had given me a card on my birthday the previous spring. I told my grandmother about Prince, about the sound he made at the exact time we were still inside, the exact time Mrs. Carver was still inside. My grandmother nodded. She said she knew. She said some animals know when a soul is crossing, and they say what they can say about it. I have thought about that specific sound for almost 50 years. I have had other dogs in my life, and none of them have made it. I know what Prince was saying now in a way I didn't at 8 years old. What I also know is what the South Bronx felt like in the years after those fires. The blocks that came back, the community organizations that refused to let the neighborhood be only its own ruin, the people who stayed and rebuilt with what they had. They saved the Bronx. That's documented. That's what the people who lived through it have said plainly. We didn't burn the Bronx. We were the ones who saved it. But on certain blocks, on certain nights, there is still something in the air that people who grew up there recognize, and that they don't always have words for. A weight, a presence on blocks that were rebuilt on top of blocks that burned. My cousin still lives in the South Bronx. She has told me about walking home at night and feeling something specific on certain corners, something she describes as the neighborhood remembering. 250,000 people lost their homes to those fires. Mrs. Carver lost more than her home. Prince said something about it that night on Manita Street. It was the most specific thing I have ever heard an animal say. I understood it at 8 years old, even without words. I still hear it sometimes. Late at night, in the years when something wakes me and I don't know why. I understand it better now. I grew up 2 blocks from 62nd and Osage Avenue in West Philadelphia. So let me just say that first, before I say anything else, because it matters for everything I'm about to tell you. On May 13th, 1985, the city of Philadelphia dropped an incendiary device from a police helicopter onto a row house on Osage Avenue. The house was occupied by members of an organization called MOVE. The fire spread. Firefighters were ordered to let it burn. 61 homes were destroyed. 11 people lost their lives inside, 5 of them children. 250 people were left with nothing. The city eventually rebuilt the houses. It did the job badly. The rebuilt homes were structurally unsound, and residents had to sue to be compensated again years later. I grew up with this history, the way you grow up with any neighborhood history, as background noise, as something the adults knew about that sometimes made them quiet in a specific way when it came up. My grandmother would not walk on that block. She never told me why directly. I understood it was connected. The thing I want to tell you is about the smell. One of the rebuilt houses on Osage Avenue, I'm not going to say which number, has a smell that comes off it at night. Not every night. On certain nights when the air is a particular way, you can catch it passing by. It is the smell of something burning, not garbage, not a grill, not the residual of a fireplace. Burning in the specific way that structures burn, the way wood and plaster and everything inside a home burns when it goes all the way through. I noticed it the first time when I was around 12. I was walking home late from a friend's house, and I was past curfew and I was moving fast, and I caught it at the edge of the block and I stopped. I stood there and I smelled it and I looked at the houses, and nothing was on fire, and no smoke was visible anywhere. I asked my grandmother about it that night. It was late, and I probably shouldn't have woken her, but I did. She sat up and looked at me for a moment. She said, "You smelled it?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Some nights it comes. It has always come. It will always come." She did not say anything else, and I did not push her. What I have found out as an adult, talking to people who were there on May 13th, who were on those blocks that night, is that the smell of that fire, the specific smell of 60 homes burning for hours, is something that nobody who was there has ever forgotten. It is a smell that has a precise memory attached to it. It is not a smell you smell by accident. The other thing that some people report, and I am telling you this because I have heard it from more than one person who grew up around there, is the sound. On certain nights, near certain addresses on that block, there are children's voices, not playing, not the ordinary sound of neighborhood kids at a distance, something with more weight than that, something that sounds like it is coming from inside one of the rebuilt houses, from a specific floor at a time when no children should be awake. I'm not going to tell you what I think is happening on that block because I don't know. What I know is that my grandmother refused to walk on Osage Avenue, and that I have smelled that smell more than once in my life, and that 11 people lost their lives on that block, including 5 children, and that the city was told by courts to make it right and kept finding ways not to. Some things don't go away because you rebuild over them. Some things are specifically not going to let you forget. The smell comes on certain nights. It has always come. It will always come. In 1992, East Palo Alto, California, had the highest per capita murder rate of any city in the United States. 42 homicides in a population of 24,000, a city of 2.5 square miles surrounded on all sides by some of the wealthiest real estate in the world: Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Atherton. The crack epidemic had gutted the city. Gang violence was constant. The neighborhood I moved into 30 years later has a median home value of over $1 million. There is a Four Seasons hotel 2 blocks from where people used to play fireworks or gunshots every summer night. That game is exactly what it sounds like. You hear a loud bang. You figure out which one it is. I moved to East Palo Alto in 2022 because it was the only thing a person making what I make could afford within commuting distance of where I worked. Smaller house than I wanted. Block that still felt like it was in the middle of its transition from one thing to another. Some houses renovated, some still the original structure from the 70s, a few vacant lots where things used to be. My block had an energy to it at night that I noticed the first week and never fully got used to. Not threatening, not dangerous, something more specific than that. Like the air had a weight on certain nights, like the street remembered something. It was a Saturday in October, around 2 in the morning. I was awake because I couldn't sleep, which happened a lot in the first months in that house. I was in the kitchen getting water. My kitchen window looks out onto the side yard, which connects to a narrow strip between my house and the house next door. There was something in the strip between the houses. I want to describe it accurately, and I want to be honest that describing it accurately makes it sound like I was dreaming, and I was not dreaming. I was standing in my kitchen with a glass of water, and the kitchen light was on, and I was fully awake. It was large, taller than a person. It was in the darker part of the strip where the light from my kitchen didn't fully reach, but I could see enough. Wings, or something that functioned like wings, folded against what should have been shoulders. A shape that suggested a body, but in proportions that didn't work for a person. And eyes. The eyes are the specific thing. Bloodshot red, not reflecting light from my window, generating their own, looking directly at me. I want to tell you I screamed or ran or did anything. I did nothing. This is the part I've tried to explain to people and cannot explain adequately. I could not move. Not because I was frozen from fear. I have been scared before, and I know what that feels like. This was different. It was like something in my nervous system had been interrupted between the intention to move and the movement itself. I could think clearly. I could understand what I was seeing. I could form the thought I need to get away from the window. And then nothing happened. The eyes looked at me, and whatever was looking at me was not surprised by me, and was not afraid of me, and had been in that strip between those houses for a long time. I don't know how long we stayed that way. It felt like minutes. At some point I blinked or looked down for a fraction of a second and it was gone. The strip between the houses was empty. I stood at my window for another few minutes and there was nothing. I did not sleep that night. In the morning I went outside and walked the strip. I was looking for something. Footprints. Some physical evidence of what had been there. I found nothing that gave me an explanation. What I found was that the ground in that strip was different from the rest of my yard. Drier. Different in a way I can't fully account for, like something had been in that particular narrow space consistently enough to change the quality of the ground underneath. I have lived in that house for 3 years now. I have not seen it again, but I have not used that kitchen after midnight either. Some decisions you make without fully deciding. East Palo Alto had 42 homicides in 1992. I have thought about what that means for the land, what that many lives ending violently in 2.5 square miles leaves behind. I don't have an answer. I just know that whatever was in that strip between my houses had red eyes and did not blink and made it impossible for me to look away. I think about the game, fireworks or gunshots. I think about what it means to grow up calibrating to that. And I think about what grows in places where that has been the normal for long enough. Something does. I've seen it. Everybody in Sandtown knew the corner house was wrong. That's the word we use for it, not haunted. That's a white people's word. We just said, that house is wrong. I grew up in Sandtown, Winchester, and West Baltimore. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, what I'll say is it's one of the most documented struggling neighborhoods in America. The CDC has studied it, reporters have written about it, politicians have used it in speeches for decades. What makes Sandtown different is the people who stayed. My grandmother stayed, her mother before her. The neighborhood held on through everything because the people were the kind of people who hold on. The corner house had been empty for years by the time I was old enough to notice it. People on our block knew why it was empty. Something had happened there. I was too young for the full story, but I understood that the something was specific, and that the adults who knew the full version got a look on their face when it came up that I recognized. The look that meant, this is not something we go further into right now. A family moved in when I was around 8. They were not from the neighborhood. They didn't know. I remember watching the moving truck from my grandmother's porch and understanding at 8 years old what it meant that nobody on the block had gone over to help them carry things in the way people usually did on our block when someone new moved in. Nobody went over. We just watched. They lasted 7 months. The mother came over to my grandmother's house toward the end. I was in the kitchen, and I could hear them talking in the front room. The mother's voice was at a particular pitch, not panicked, something more controlled than that, like someone asking a doctor to explain something they already mostly understand. I couldn't hear everything. What I heard my grandmother say back was, "How long has she been seeing it?" I didn't hear the answer. The family moved in January. 2 years later, another family. Also not from the neighborhood. Also didn't know. I was 10 by then, and I had a theory about that house that I had not told anyone. My theory was that something in there was attached to a specific room, and that when the room was empty, whatever was in it was content to stay still. And when someone was in the room with it, it did what it did. I don't know what it did because nobody who experienced it would describe it fully to me. What I know is that the second family moved out in 4 months, and the woman from the second family, before she left, came and stood on our sidewalk and looked at the house for a while, and then looked at my grandmother's house, and then walked over and knocked. I was doing homework at the kitchen table, and I heard the whole conversation. The woman said, "I need to know what's in there before I leave. I need to know what my daughter saw at the foot of her bed." And my grandmother, whose voice I had never heard say certain things, said, "It's connected to the bedroom on the second floor facing the street. I don't know what it is. I know it's been there longer than any house on this block. I know it shows itself around sunrise. I know it's gone by the time the sun is fully up." The woman went back to the corner house and finished packing. I am 41 years old. I live in another part of Baltimore now. I have not been back to that specific corner in many years. What I know from people who still live on that block is that the corner house has been empty for a long time, that the city has tried to find buyers and found nobody who stays, that the neighbors have stopped trying to explain to anyone who asks. My grandmother is gone now. She passed 4 years ago. Before she passed, she told me a few things she had never told me before, about the neighborhood and about the house specifically. She told me something had happened in that house before I was born that was connected to what was in that second floor room. She said some things leave something behind when they go. She said, the ones who stay don't know they're staying. They just can't leave. I think about that corner house sometimes, about what a 10-year-old has a theory about, and what that theory means when you're 41 and understand more about the world. Think about what it costs to know something is wrong and stay on the same block anyway, because it's your block and it has always been your block, and you don't let a wrong house run you off what is yours. That is Sandtown. That has always been Sandtown. The corner house is wrong, and the neighborhood is still there. Let me tell you about Prichard, Alabama, because most people have never heard of it, and I think that matters for what I'm about to say. Pritchard sits on the outskirts of Mobile. In the 1960s and 70s, it was the fastest growing city in Alabama. Population hit 45,000. Good jobs at the paper mills. Good jobs at the Air Force Base. Families came and built something real. My family came in 1964 and bought a house and stayed. Then the mills closed. Then the base shut down. The businesses left. The people who could leave left. The population dropped by half, then more than half. The city went bankrupt in 1999. It filed for bankruptcy again in 2009 and used that filing to try to stop paying pensions to its retired workers, retired police officers, retired firefighters, People who had given 30 and 40 years of their lives to a city that then said it simply didn't have the money. 14 of those retirees passed away after their checks stopped coming. Alfred Arnold, Pritchard's first black firefighter, 35 years of service, went to work as a mall security guard at 66 to keep his house. I am telling you all of this so you understand what kind of place Prichard is. A place that was built with real intention and real community and was then emptied out by forces too large to fight and left to hold what it had been. A place that America used and then forgot about. A place where the people who stayed because they had nowhere else to go, or because they refused to let it be only what happened to it. I am in the second category. I stayed because it is my city, and I will not let it become only its own abandonment. My building is from the 1970s. 3 stories, 8 units. 4 of us remain. The building has a specific quality that I noticed when I moved back from Mobile in my 30s, and that I have come to understand better over the years. It is not a haunted building in the way people use that word. It is more accurate to say it is a full building. The way an old church is full, or the way a cemetery is full, occupied in a way that goes past the people you can see. The tapping started the first winter I moved back, coming from inside the walls, not from pipes, different from pipes. Anyone who lives in an old building knows the difference. Tapping, rhythmic, usually at night, sometimes in the afternoon. My neighbor in 2B heard it too, independently, before I mentioned it to her. She had been in the building 15 years and said it had always been there. She had just learned to understand it as part of the building's nature. I started talking about it one night to myself. I do that. I think out loud when I'm trying to work something through. I was in my kitchen and I said out loud, I hear you. I don't know what you are, but I hear you. The tapping got louder, not frightening loud, response loud. The way something gets louder when it has been heard and it is confirming receipt. I thought about what I know about Pritchard, about the 45,000 people who built something here, about the ones who stayed when the building left, about the retired firefighter found in his house, with no electricity and no running water, too proud to ask for help, about what it means for a place to hold the memory of everyone who ever gave something to it. There are 2 things in this building that are different from the general fullness. I have become certain of this over 3 years. One of them I have made my peace with. It moves through the building the way weather moves through a building, present everywhere at certain times, gone at others, not interested in interaction. The other one I have not made peace with in the same way. It stays closer to specific places. The corner of my bedroom near the window, the stairwell between the 2nd and 3rd floor at night. It does not feel like something that was ever a person. It feels like something older than the building, and older than the neighborhood, and older than what Pritchard became when people built it on top of what was already here. On certain nights when that second presence is strong, the building's remaining residents do not talk about it, but we do not stay in our apartments alone either. We find reasons to be in the shared spaces, the hallway, the lobby. We do not always acknowledge why. I have talked to older residents about what this land was before the city, before the neighborhood, before any of us. The answers I get are partial, and they trail off in a way that suggests people know more than they say. What I know is that Pritchard was a city that was built and filled and hollowed out by things bigger than itself, and the people who stayed are still here, and that whatever was on this land before us never fully yielded to the presence of people, and that the 2 things have existed alongside each other for a long time now. Something lives in this building. It taps back when I talk to it. I don't ask it questions anymore. I learned that the answers come in ways I am not ready for. My uncle lived in the same apartment in Roxbury for 43 years. Same building, same floor, same view of the street. He was there through all of it. The difficult years in the neighborhood, the rebuilding, the gradual changes as Roxbury shifted around him. He understood his building the way you understand something you've lived alongside for 40 years. He had his own name for it. He called it the building with a long memory. He passed in March. Not sudden. We had time with him, which I'm grateful for. He was 87, and he was ready, and he told each of us what he needed to tell us before he went. What he did not tell us was anything about the object in the closet. We went to clear his apartment in April, my mother and 2 aunts and me. It was the kind of day you move through on a specific kind of autopilot, doing what needs doing because doing is easier than the alternative. We packed his things, his dishes, his clothes, the photographs he had arranged on every flat surface. We were almost finished when my aunt opened the closet in the back bedroom and found the shelf. Everything else on the shelf was ordinary. The thing itself was ordinary looking. A small carved wooden figure, maybe 8 inches tall, old in the way that things get when they've been handled consistently for a long time. Smooth where hands had touched it. My uncle had a cloth wrapped around the base of it. He had clearly tended to it. None of us knew what it was or where it came from. My uncle had never shown it to us and never mentioned it. My mother took it. The first night it was in my mother's house. Something woke her at 3 in the morning. She described it as a specific presence in the room, not threatening, just specific. The way a person is present in a room. She lay still for a while, and then the presence was gone. She told me this the next day and said she thought she had been dreaming. Second night, same thing. Third night, she called me. I went to her house and I sat with the figure for a while, and I tried to understand what I was looking at. While I was sitting with it, I smelled something, brief and specific. It smelled like the inside of my uncle's apartment, not his cologne, not cleaning product. The actual smell of the place he had lived for 43 years. The smell that your body connects to a person's home without knowing it until it's gone. I drove home with the figure. My uncle used to say he had kept certain things because they kept certain things with them. He said it the way he said most things, like it was obvious, and he wasn't sure why he had to explain it. I never pushed him on what he meant, because some things you understand are not meant to be pushed on. I keep the figure on a shelf in my living room. I have not wrapped it in cloth the way he did. I probably should, and I've been meaning to. On certain nights, not every night, not predictably, the room where the figure sits has a presence, the way my mother described it. Not frightening, something I recognize without being able to fully name it. I also noticed, 3 or 4 months after I brought it home, that the finish on the wooden figure's face had changed slightly. My uncle had a look he used when he was watching you figure something out. Patient, slightly amused, waiting to see if you were going to get there on your own. He used it on me my whole life. The figure has that look now in a way I don't remember noticing when we first found it. I have shown photographs to my aunts. Neither of them remembered the expression looking that specific when we found it. I leave it where it is. I say good morning to it when I come into the room. He was 87, and he was ready, and he left us everything he meant to leave us, including this. Okay, you made it to the end. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch the video. Please like, share, subscribe, hype the video. As I said earlier, get in those comments and let me know which video was your favorite. Please submit your stories, and I'll read them for you. Have a nice day.